On that, recently, the International Refugee Assistance Project hosted a Newsmakers briefing on the state of refugee resettlement and asylum in the U.S., in which the team of ITV Gold also participated. The discussion saw key members of the project discussing the challenges and push against refugees and asylum seekers this year and what is being done to counter the trend. Here is the story.
This is critical, not only because this is a part of the American immigration policies, which have been changing dramatically under the Trump administration, but it's also a timely topic. Normally, the US president is supposed to announce the quota for the next fiscal year of how many refugees we're going to accept in the next year. So the next fiscal year starts on October 1st. Today is September 29th, and there's still no words. So potentially, there could be breaking news at any moment. But there is still some certainty in this news. Under Trump, the number of refugees the US is taking in has been dropping a lot, specifically from 85,000 to 18,000 this year. So if everything goes following this trend, the number will still be even less. So how would this affect the refugees and asylum seekers in this country, and how would this affect the reputation and the values that American people are holding?
I mean, even more pressing, maybe one can say, is the new year, 2021, for the United States starts on October 1st, this week. Before the year begins, the president is supposed to set the goal, the target for the coming year. The president has not done that yet. Before he does that, he's supposed to, by law, he's required to consult with Congress to come up with the target. He has not consulted with Congress yet. So what that tells us is probably, or most likely this week, he will not meet the requirement by law to consult with Congress and set a presidential determination or target for how many refugees can come to the US in 2021. Unless he makes this determination, unless he makes his presidential determination, there can be no refugees admitted into the United States.
So I've worked with an Iraqi family who had to flee Iraq due to their affiliations with the US Army. So this case, we started working on it in early 2017, and the case got submitted in the year 2017. They got interviewed by the US officials at the end of the year 2018, and they have not received a decision for their interview yet to this point. So they've been in the process for about 3 years, and there are still multiple steps to be taken for them to get resettled. So even these steps are potentially going to take many years. And how long they're going to take completely depends on future policies that the US take.
I was wondering if you could talk about the situation that is facing asylum seekers who are already in the US. My understanding is that even before some of the most recent changes in the judicial process of dealing with asylum applications went into effect, that it was something like a 13% approval rating in the administrative courts that were dealing with these cases, and my sense is that number is even lower now. So I was wondering if you could talk about what has happened in terms of slowing down the process of evaluating and approving asylum applications.
Over the last 4 years, those backlogs have increased exponentially. So if you apply for asylum now, generally there is a good chance that you will have to wait years for a resolution to your case. There have been some processing changes to try to get at that. But in some, we can just say backlogs have increased exponentially. In terms of approval rates, There's also a variety, or the approval rate for who gets granted asylum does depend on the office, because an office, for example, the office in Houston has a much lower asylum grant rate than the office in San Francisco.
Who are the most vulnerable communities seeking asylum right now? And if I was to ask you what is the greatest need of the hour there, what would you say?
So over the last 5 years, for example, in the affirmative asylum backlog, Venezuelans fleeing the crisis in Venezuela have made a huge percentage of the pending cases in the United States. On the flip side, in the refugee pipeline, as Rayed mentioned, you see people fleeing the Syrian refugee crisis, or the Syrian crisis, as some of the largest numbers of refugees in the world. So those are kind of like the larger numbers.